Now the title of this video is simply design. Unfortunately, design can be many things. Design is to design a design to produce a design. It can be several nouns, it can be several verbs, it can be general, it can be an outcome, it can be a plan, it can be an action. Design is a really flexible word. How does engineering fit in with design? Well, it's typically seen as the intersection between science and art. Many of you will not think of engineering necessarily as an art, but other people do. And particularly when you have to work with artists and they have a very different working style to engineers, you really need to appreciate that different people approach things in completely different ways. For example, many artists that I've worked with over the journey produce great work at the last minute every single time. And it makes it very difficult to plan. So you need to appreciate the working styles of different disciplines and the people that you're working with. Engineering in one sense has been spoken of as useful art, where function is more important than form. That's a big discussion in itself, and I'm not going to continue it here. But let's look into design and the way that it's considered internationally very quickly. If you look at design, the English understanding of design, just above the line, design can turn up in art, in a project, in a plan, in a construction, in the way something's conceived. There are many ways that it can be used. You look at the ways that it can be used in a number of European language. There are some overlaps, but you can see that in French and in German, conception and construction are similar to the English design, but some words also aren't used. So art is pretty much the same, project is pretty much the same. They all have a similar concept of design. In Italian, a designero is really somebody who draws. So you need to have some sensitivity to the fact that design, as well as being a very flexible word, can be understood differently in different languages, and it's worth having a conversation if you ever happen to work in an international context, as I have. Now there's a taxonomy for design that people often think through. There's selection problems, where you're looking through a set of things and pulling them out. Multi-criteria decision problems are a particular class of problems that are really useful, and you come across them in lots of fields. Wicked problems you may have heard of, problems that just don't seem to have any solution. In terms of system improvement, there are tuning problems. There can be crises that cut across both design problems and system improvement problems. And this is how design fits together across a spectrum. You need to be aware if you're doing a design problem or a system improvement problem. So let's dig a little bit deeper now in thinking about design. What are some specific questions that you can think through when you're actually doing a design? One way that I've thought about design for a long time is you think about the functions of an object and the attributes of an object. So the functions of this trailer here are: it connects to a vehicle, has to support a load, has to transfer loads to the road, has to be able to bounce around a little bit. So it has to be able to do some things. And then those things are then represented by particular attributes. So it has wheels. It does minimize drag. What it has, what it does. It's two very separate and distinct things. What it has and what it does. And you need to be really aware of the universe of possibilities for what something can do and what something can have. Some common things that people often think about in business is eliminating waste, wasting time, removing defects, wasted inventory. Look through this list if you're just given a task of finding a problem in a business. This can often help you to ask some people some questions. Walk around and talk to people about their processes about what they're keeping in stock, about what defects. Okay, use the existing methods out there for actually analysing businesses and finding waste. For a busy executive, anything that wastes their time is something they would like eliminated. So always keep that in mind. A very specific and very useful design tool that I've used in analysing requirements is coming up. I cannot recommend this particular system highly enough in terms of defining requirements. It's highly specific and it gives you an outstanding list of questions for actually thinking about products. It's an old tool. It was developed by the International Standards Organisation, and there are two components to it, one around product quality and one around quality in use. In terms of product quality, there's a list of categories there. You can find a spreadsheet and fill these things in, and that can form the basic set of requirements for your product. You can identify the overall function, the global problem that's being solved in terms of something that you can write a paper about. But then you can break it down into these very useful categories. You can look at effectiveness, you can look at efficiency. I'm not going to list all the categories, but this is a really valuable tool. The second component of this tool is around quality in use. This has effectiveness and efficiency, satisfaction, context coverage, freedom from risk. These are fantastic questions to take with you to understand the domain you're in and find gaps within that domain. What you're doing is you're balancing the gaps in the domain with the gaps in the literature. You need both. The gaps in the literature will give you an idea about some work you might want to do, but it has to talk to the domain that you're in. If you're not joining those dots between the literature and the domain, you're not producing anything that's of value to an executive. But if you're just looking at that domain and you're not actually relating it back to the literature, then you're not producing anything that's of value to anybody else except the executive. You're not contributing to international progress in engineering as a whole. So you need to be careful about how those work. Let's also have a think about the user, because the user is an interesting concept. The user. Well, users can be broken down into many categories for essentially the same thing. Here's a classic example from Coca-Cola, but as you know, Coca-Cola has a vast range of variations on a theme. But they're very good at figuring out how to break down the different users, how to approach the various groups. They do a wonderful job at actually creating a picture of what they're aiming at. Another thing to keep in mind is flexibility. If you're going to create something, what are you going to do with it in the future? You look at the classic Swiss Army knife, and here's an example here. This knife has been extended with so many tools because it has a particular architecture that just allows many things to be added to it. It's fantastic.